welcome back, my old homesteader here. And today I had promised you earlier that I was also going to try to get to the puff pastry recipe, and here we are. So it is still in the middle of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and so I'm always looking for ways to have bread in our home or even at my restaurant. That was really hard when I had the restaurant that was unleavened, because I wouldn't sell any leavened product. I wouldn't make any leavened product at the restaurant. So one year, because I always make croissants and the goldies and all of those items, one year the Lord just, he told me to grab that big new professional chef cookbook I had and look through it, and sure enough, I found this puff pastry recipe. It cooks up very similar to a croissant dough in that you have a lot of butter. This is not low fat, people. This is 8 sticks of butter, 2 full pounds. And I cut the recipe in half already because of course I had to do larger quantities. But just remember, this is not low fat, but because you have so much butter, the butter helps create this flaky tender. Now tonight I promised my husband and son some of the beef that has been slaughtered that we do cube steaks with. So I'm going to do some chicken fried steak, roasted baked potatoes with our puff pastry biscuits tonight. But you can do anything with this dough. It's really versatile. You can roll it out and use it as a pizza during Feast of Unleavened Bread Week. You can make pastries with it. So you can fill it with cream cheese and a little bit of sugar mixed together, and you can put fruit topping in it, roll it up kind of like a Danish, so form it like a Danish. You can form them up like croissants, and they kind of become the crescent style, like, you know, when I haven't done those for years, but the Pillsbury dough kind, where I think they were called crescent rolls. And so they're not quite a croissant, but they have also that flaky like texture. This has no yeast, no leaven though, so it's really neat. You mix it up similar to what you would do a pie crust. So with that, let's just get started. Now, I have already weighed out a lot of the ingredients. I'm going to show you one trick with the butter. Now this one, really neat. We don't have to do a butter pat. There's no beurre. B-E-U-R-R-E is the French word for the butter pat. For the croissant dough, this one you don't have to do it. Your butter actually incorporates evenly in little tidbits throughout the dough mixture. So it's not the same as a croissant dough, not quite as tricky to get perfect. But I am going to show you how I cut it that I like to incorporate it. You don't have to do it my way, it's just an option. I'm going to be mixing this by hand. When I'm at the restaurant, I mix it lightly with a tabletop mixer. I do not use my floor stand mixer because it has too much energy and speed and power. So I am going to mix this by hand though today, because many of you don't even have the big mixers at home, or the little tabletop mixers even at home. So that, without any further ado, let's start. So 1 pound of non-GMO white flour and 1 pound of non-GMO pastry flour. Equivalently with cups, it's going to be around 3 cups of each, so approximately 6 cups. But I'm telling you, if you can learn to cook by weight, you'll do much better. But if you don't have a scale, I would approximately do 3 cups of each, so a total of 6 cups of flour. And if you don't have pastry flour, just use the all-purpose non-GMO flour that you have. If you're going to use whole wheat flour, I am going to suggest then increasing the liquid, because whole wheat needs more hydration to break down the protein and to make it to work. Now, I've done a lot of recipes because I do catering right now for a facility where I try not to use any white flour. It has to be low sugar, low fat, whole grain. And so I do substitute recipes out. I do make biscuits for them that are whole wheat, but you need to increase the quantity of liquid that you have, because the whole wheat flour still has the bran and the germ and all that stuff that is just quite honestly, it's just more coarse and more fibrous. So go ahead and mix these flours together. Then you need 1 quart, or 4 cups in a quart, right, of cold water. Try to get it as cold and ice cold as possible. If you're not going to use it right away, stick it in the fridge or put ice cubes in it like we do with our pie crust. But go ahead and 1 cup water and 1 ounce, again, this one, I don't know, I would say 2 tablespoons about of salt, but 1 ounce of salt, and you're going to pour the salt into the water first. Okay, so we're going to mix that together. We're just going to let it sit over here dissolving. Then 1 second here while I go to the fridge and get my butter. I'm going to bring out 2 pounds of butter, and we're going to incorporate that really quick here. But I had to keep it cold because you want this super cold. Now, I left one stick out so I can show you how I do it, but this you can kind of see here. This is 7 of the 8 sticks. I'm gonna quickly dump it in. I'm gonna, did you see that poof of flour? That was kind of neat. I'm going to quickly get it coated. The flour coats the butter, then it more evenly and better melts into the dough, so you get these nice little pockets of air, not leaven, but you get these nice little pockets of air. Now, when I cut my butter stick, I go, let me bring the camera down here for a moment. We go in half, one direction. We go in half the other direction, and then I simply start dicing, very similar to what I would do with a pie crust. Now, it is okay to leave these larger than you would with a pie crust because we're gonna roll it out with a rolling pin, and it's kind of nice for whatever reason, and I haven't studied the science side of this, and I should, but it's nice to have the big chunks in there, because even if you look at Martha Stewart's book, she mixes it with a mixer, and then you take the blob of butter and portion them literally on the puff pastry dough, evenly spaced. So this, you could mix this butter about 30 seconds with a paddle in, you know, in your mixer, and then put it into here, but I prefer this. This keeps it a little colder, a little flakier texture, and since I'm going to be trying to use it for biscuits for the boys tonight, well, and myself too, but it's their treat. And I'm going to keep these butter chunks a little bit colder, because when you do mix it with a paddle, there's heat generated in the movement. Now, I want to show you what I'm doing here. Let me again bring the camera down. So you can see here, I'm just gently, I squeeze it with my fingers, and you can kind of feel it. It's, like I said, it's okay to keep it a little bit larger than you normally would, like with your pie crust and whatnot. You want to get it really small to pea-sized crumbles. And when you make a pâté brisé, it's even smaller, at least mine is, and it turns out fantastic. This one though, I do keep it larger. Now, I'm not gonna overwork it. I've done enough. Now, gently and slowly, you're gonna add your water, and you're gonna just mix it until it's mixed. Very similar to biscuits. The rule I always was taught with biscuits, do not ever knead it more than 15 times. And then you don't want to stir it almost at all. So very similar principles here. You don't want to over knead this. It is going to be kneaded a bit more, and we are going to roll it out. But if at all you feel the butter starting to melt, like if your home is warm, if it's a warm day and you're trying to make this, get it in the fridge every few turns, which you're gonna find out what that is in a minute, or every few times that you're working it, every few minutes that you're working it, because you need that butter to be cold. If the butter's not cold, it won't interact in the correct manner and create the flakiness, because what you need is it to just instantly melt, and then boom, give that little burst of steam when it's melting that gets trapped in the gluten of the flour. So, okay, I've mixed it together. This is a little wet, so now I'm going to move my cutting board over, and we're going to knead this a little bit here. So I'm going to generously flour my surface. Because of the altitude, it could also be because of the weather. One of the things people do is they lock themselves into a recipe, and you can't do that, because every single day your recipe could alter, and you have to be able, and you have to learn how to read your dough, because temperature and humidity in the air will affect your dough, its rising, its consistency, and the amount of liquid and the hydration that's happening to it. So just remember, don't panic. There's always a fix, right? Perfect is the enemy of the good, and just keep going. So right now, the amount that's specified for the recipe, I weighed everything out, measured it was perfect, and it's worked perfect this way, but today it's not. We are having snow right now. We're in the middle of a snowstorm. So I'm gonna pause the video. I am gonna run and get more flour, and I'm gonna be right back. Okay, here we go again. I am going to literally dump, because I can tell this dough is very wet from the moisture in the air or whatever's happening. I literally added almost another full cup so far. And I'm going to gently, do you see how I'm not really working it too much? Because I'm trying not to get the butter to melt. So I'm working it, but not how I would normal dough. I do not want the gluten development. I do not want that gluten development that we normally get. We are looking for cold butter, crisp, flaky layers. And okay, there. So you see how I got it to roll under and tuck under, and it all has come together now? Oh, yes. Yay. Okay, what I'm going to do, the butter, honestly, is really firm. It is really cold out today. It's like, oh, I don't know, a bad temperature. We don't even want to say the degrees, but it's definitely below freezing, or it was below freezing when I woke up. But now, here we go. What I do, guys, this gets a number of what are called turns. You roll out this dough very gently. I'm not going to, do you see how the butter's still intact there? But what you want to do is take this, and I'm keeping it very hydrated, and I am very specifically not overworking it. And I folded 1/3 over another. Now, you can at this point quickly put it in the fridge and then roll it out again. But what I do to save my time, save myself time, is I go right in half here. And what I've ended up with at this point is 1, 2, 3 layers with the first roll. And now I doubled it, so I have 6 layers. I am going to, you can cover this in plastic wrap. You can put it on a piece of parchment paper, but I would definitely suggest getting it in the fridge before you do the next roll. So I'm going to stick this in the fridge. You don't want it to get over hard, because you will then tear the dough. I know this is all complicated, but so I would say about 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure it's chilled. Then we're gonna come back out, we're gonna roll it again, and then I'll show you some forming ideas. Shalom. Okay, so we are back. I have chilled this approximately for 10 minutes. Maybe not quite 10 minutes. And I'm going to dump the dough onto my work surface here. And then I want you to be able to watch it again. Now I had the plastic wrap on the top, but I only had on the bottom of it the parchment paper. And it's just nice and chilled. Now I'm going to generously flour it again. With certain recipes in my croissants, I would never do that. But because puff pastry has a different consistency, higher hydration point, and such, I'm going to. Now I'm rolling it out. You can get really particular, and if the folds were this way, then you face it this way from you and you roll it side to side, or you can turn it this way. Honestly, with my croissants, I'm pickier than this dough. With this particular dough, it's gonna come out fine. It's just one of those very forgiving doughs, but do not overmix it. Now, you can do this turning process as many times as you want, but what you will run into danger of is overworking the dough. So this is going to be my last time of working the dough. Then, again, like I did last time, I fold a third. I'm going to go in half. I will no longer, see how beautiful it is? I just love dough, it's amazing. Now, I will no longer work this other than rolling it out. I am going to freeze my dough, because we have 3 of us in this family, and there's no way we could eat this much. But I'm going to quickly cut, let me show you this. I'm going to cut a section off, this end section here. Do not cut through the counter, just stop right here and just gently rock it to the end. I want to show you this. Look at those layers. Do you see what I'm talking about? Now we're gonna squish it down. At my restaurant, I have a dough roller. Oh my gosh, I can go like hundreds of layers because it just like squishes it down that machine. My arms aren't as strong as my dough roller here. So we're gonna roll it by hand, but those layers are amazing. They're gonna puff up. Now, because these are biscuits, remember, I want my biscuits to be puffy and tall. I'm going to very, very lightly and gently roll this. However, when I make this stuff into pizza dough, I am going to squish it as flat as possible and then prick it with a fork. If you want to make crackers, you can do the same sort of detail to it, except for then use like a pie crust roller to cut it into little squares, or use cookie cutters for the children, or whatever you'd like to do. You could put cheese on top of it, olive oil and cheese with some herbs if you want to make just like a focaccia style bread, and then leave it again a little bit thicker and put your fingers in it to dimple it. But this dough freezes well for up to a couple weeks. You can keep it in the fridge for up to 3 days so it won't ferment. It should not get any leavening action, it should just hydrate because there's no yeast in it. Now, I do put my croissant doughs, which have yeast in them, in the fridge, and they slow ferment, but that's because there's already yeast in it. So I don't think you would get the risk of leavening. If you feel like you could, put it in the freezer just to make sure. Anyway, this dough for our family is going in the freezer. Lots of beautiful layers. I will wrap it up for future use. My husband wants pizza with it, hot dog wraps, so we use, kosher organic beef hot dogs with, of course, no pork casings. And then you roll that really thin, and you wrap it around the hot dog and bake it. Now, with these biscuits, see, I'm gonna stop right here. See that? Actually, then I'm gonna fold them back over because we don't need a lot of biscuits tonight. My husband may disagree with me. He's sitting right over there. But I did fold it over one more time simply because I thought it could take it. So we have so many layers, folks, because remember we had 6 and then we did 3 and 3. That put it up to 12, 18. We did it in half. That turned it up to 36. And then I just rolled it out and did one more time. We're at 72 layers here. On my pastry here, and I'm not cheap, but I am frugal. So I reuse the parchment paper I was using earlier, and I just fold it in half so it doesn't stick. Set these like this. And I'm going to brush them. Okay, here they are, guys. The oven is preheated. I did mine today at 425. I'm just gonna try it there just because of humidity and everything. I'm gonna try it there. Look how they're gonna be. We're gonna stick it in the oven and then I'm gonna show you when they're all done. Hey everyone, I'm back and they're out of the oven. Now, they don't get as golden because there's no sugar. So they don't get as golden as traditional biscuits and rolls, but they are amazing and your family will love them. Let me just show you here. Look at the layers. So unleavened bread can still taste pretty awesome. Notice though, they're not low fat. You guys have a blessed rest of the week of unleavened bread. May God cleanse us all and make us one in Him. Love you all.